Yeah, I get hungry sometimes.
Yeah, no, there's other things going on. Staff, have we heard from Councillor Day? Is she planning on attending this evening?
I have not heard from Councillor Day.
Okay. It is 6:30, so are we good to go, staff?
We are good to go.
Excellent. Then I will call to order. Oh, thank you. I will call to order the February 28th regular meeting of council at 6:30 p.m. And I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the shared traditional lands of the Lekwungen speaking peoples. One of the things that around territory acknowledgements, it's always nice to actually make it a little more personable. So this evening, I just wanted to comment that last Wednesday, Councillor Kobayashi and I were fortunate enough to participate in the cultural perspective training through the CRD. And it was a very helpful seminar, and just sort of reminded us how that we should be dealing with our First Nation neighbors. Staff, I'm seeing things show up around people wanting to join the waiting room. Can I just ignore those? I'm assuming you're taking care of them?
Yes, I'm taking care of them. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. So that's going to move us to approval of the agenda. And so that I'm looking for that the near-term and long-term agendas be received, and that the agenda, of the regular council meeting for February 28th be adopted as presented. Are there any objections, questions, errors? Councillor Kobayashi?
I was just moving. Oh, I didn't have to move it.
No, that's great. No, we'll move it. We'll move it. Do I have a seconder tonight for that? Thank you. Councillor Baxter has seconded it. So any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes.
Point of order,
yes.
Mayor Martin.
Please go ahead.
Do you have to do a roll call, or we?
Yes, I should. Yeah, and thank you for catching that. Sorry, I keep getting distracted by this waiting room. I keep getting things flashing up. So yeah, thank you, Councillor Kobayashi. So let's do a verbal roll call just to ensure that everybody's here. Councillor Kobayashi?
I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Parkinson?
I'm here.
Councillor Jansen?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Logan?
I'm here, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter?
And I am here too.
Thank you. Confirming, Councillor Day, you have not joined us? Okay. I'm sure she'll be able to get on soon. So that takes us to Mayor's message. I have a couple things this evening, just in regards to the Mayor's message. First of all, I think on behalf of all of council, we share the sadness that's happening in the Ukraine region right now, and really struggle with that. And certainly our prayers and thoughts are with the Ukrainian people as they're going through this trying time. On Saturday, we were fortunate enough that we had the coldest night of the year event. And I did want to just make an opportunity to thank some people. I wanted to thank Councillors Parkinson, Baxter, Jansen, and Logan for fundraising and attending, as well as staff member Sandra Russell was able to attend. And then also, I wanted to make a special thank you to Ian Borhill, Nora Brooks, and Pat Van Buskert, who all contributed to the Colwood Council fund. That was, we were able to raise $750 from our group, and the evening we were told that it was raising about $38,000 for that night, with all of the proceeds going to Our Place and Pacific Family Resource Center. So it was a great evening, and it was great turnout. We a whole bunch of, I think there were 38 teams there, so that was wonderful. The second thing I just wanted to share with you was I believe it was last Wednesday, was the BC budget. And I just wanted to share a couple really quick things, just to let people know that the budget was at 1:30 in the afternoon, and the Minister of Transportation called me at 3 p.m. He called me to tell me that the ferry feasibility study was not going to be in this year's budget, which was clearly disappointing. But also the conversation continued. He said, well, but there is some good news that I could share with you, Rob. The good news that he shared was that the Bellevue station at the Inner Harbor is going through a complete redesign, and it's going to be a new building that will support both the Coho Ferry and the Victoria Clipper, which will definitely support tourism in the region. But he also mentioned to me that the building will have an option for a passenger-only ferry that will ply local waters. But we will not be doing the feasibility study this year, with the comments. So we continue to hold out hope, and I actually believe that there's some strong momentum towards next year in having that feasibility study land sooner than later. And then finally, just one comment. I wouldn't normally comment on this, but I saw on Check today that there is a young man, Ben Squire, who's 19, attends UVic, and has announced that he will be putting his name forward for Colwood Council next term. So that will be officially the first person who has announced that they're running for council. So congratulations, and I guess we're in it. So, and then finally, I have one final letter that, if council will just be patient with me, it's a short letter, but I did want to read it, and it's just a thank you letter from the Goldstream Food Bank. And just so, for preference or for understanding for everybody's sake, what happened at Christmas time, staff did have an option to choose to make a donation to the Goldstream Food Bank. And several staff members stepped up and did that. And so the letter was, please accept our heartfelt thanks from the Goldstream Food Bank Society for your very generous donation of the amount of $1,350. We don't have the current stats for 2021. However, in 2020, the food bank averaged 240 hampers and 631 people per month in the Western communities. Children, infants to 17 years of age made up 34% of the people that they were providing support for. The hampers we provided are nutritionally compliant and are tailored to the size and nature of each family. Your generosity is greatly appreciated and is key to continued provisions of this support. The number of people who need our services fluctuate each month. Even though our numbers for 2020 were lower than in 2019, they continue to be increased in the number of new people that we are seeing needing the food bank services. Once again, thank you for your generous contribution. So congratulations to staff who made that wonderful contribution to the city, or excuse me, to the food bank. So that is the end of Mayor's message this evening. So this will take us to the adoption and receipt of minutes. So 4.1, this is the regular council meeting minutes for February 14th. Are there any errors, omissions, questions? If not, I will say that these have been received with unanimous consent, which they have been. Moving on to receipt, which is the report of the public hearing from February 22nd. Are there any objections, errors, questions? I would certainly hope not, since nobody spoke. I will, unless there's any other comments, then I will say that they've been adopted unanimously, and it doesn't look like that, so that's great. So moving on to 5, public participation. I believe we did have one correspondence, and it's my understanding, staff, we have one person registered to speak this evening.
We did have one person registered, but it doesn't appear that they've arrived yet.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe let us know if they do in the next couple minutes. Otherwise, we're going to keep moving forward, which moves us to 6, correspondence requiring council direction. This is 6.1 from Laurie Davis, the president of the Arts and Culture Society. And this is regarding letter of support from council for the application to the province for a community gaming grant. Councillor Parkinson.
I would move that the mayor write a letter of support.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Jansen. Is there any discussion? Councillor Baxter, your hand's up. Did you wish to discuss?
That was to second.
Okay, thank you. Okay, seeing no other hands, I'm just going to lower hands just for a moment. Oh, I can't. Sorry. For some reason, can I? Lower all hands. There we go. Any in opposition to that motion? Seeing none, that motion passes.
Excuse
So
me,
that,
Mayor Martin.
yes,
I believe that the person that was going to speak at public participation is actually in the meeting.
okay.
Cindy Andrew.
Cindy, are you on?
Yes, I am, and good evening. Sorry, I wasn't sure
evening.
where, I wasn't sure where I should speak up, so I can
Okay.
hold it if you would prefer to wait till it comes up in the agenda, Mayor.
No, what we'll do is Cindy, I'll have you participate right now, but unfortunately I do have to read something just before you do. I'll try and be quick through it. During public participation, members of the public will be provided an opportunity to present concerns or questions of council. Comments pertaining to the following matters that have been subject of a public hearing are prohibited at this meeting. Bylaw number 1898, Cannabis Retail, 1905 Souk Road. Bylaw number 1908, CD 31, 3554 Ryder Heshaw Way. Bylaw number 1912, CD 32, 791 Drummond Way. And bylaw number 1913, CD 2350 Souk Road. Cindy, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Mayor, and yeah, happy to not speak to any of those. What brings me here this evening to join you is to speak to a off-cycle grant and aid request from a coalition of about 30 organizations representing, including the City of Colwood, City of Langford, and the District of Souk, as well as many other government and non-government child and youth serving and family serving agencies across our great area. So before I get into my 2 cents worth here, my pitch for your consideration, I also just wanted to, I think you probably all know, I'm a very proud and citizen of Colwood, and I just want to extend thanks for the City of Colwood's commitment around supporting active travel and other ways that you're investing in supporting the health and well-being of people in our community. We all know that's directly linked to the economic prosperity and over whatever metric we want to apply. So I just wanted to take a moment to raise my hands and to give thanks to you for that effort. So extending beyond that, I wanted to share just a little bit about this ask that's before you tonight, and it's a little bit further in the agenda, and I promise to keep it as short and sweet as I possibly can. Although,
well, Cindy, Cindy, just so you know, you only have 2 minutes, unfortunately.
Okay, well then it's even going to be, it'll be short and sweet, guaranteed. There was an ask before you tonight that comes from a coalition. It's inappropriately named, as it turns out now, that has a Healthy Schools, Healthy People as a name. It's actually a much broader audience, and very much, well, the district is at the table. In fact, the district invited people to the table or organizations to the table for the very fact that the district executive leadership said schools alone cannot possibly support the health and well-being of the kids in our community. This is where we need to work in collaboration across sectors with our multi-sectoral partners. COVID and its effects and thinking about planning ahead for the next 7 generations, we know we can no longer go back to doing the things the way that we used to do. And so this effort is really about bringing together various organizations and their leaders across the sectors. And I believe, Mayor, in your documentation, all councillors would have seen a list of the participating organizations at the table. And I think it's important for you to have a look there, because there's a lot of weight from Island Health to GVPL to lots and lots of folks. Our purpose is basically focused on 2 key priorities of utmost concern to Colwoodians, as well as others across our great region. One is that notion of appropriate services to support children and youth, and by extension, families. So that includes, for example, access to things like childcare, but right through to mental health and substance use and other acute related health services that folks need as part and parcel of living in our community. The other relates to services, and that is space. And we have a very significant group of government and non-government players at this table saying we know there are services that currently we're not meeting because, frankly, while we have the resources, we don't have the space to provide those services. And this is an opportunity for Colwood to lead, to say, we're going to protect a little bit of space to make sure that the social infrastructure that's required to make sure that our children and youth get the services that they need, whether that's the upstream right through to acute care. And so the ask tonight before you is really, it's a very, in my world, a fairly modest ask, but an ask that also demonstrates our city's commitment to recognizing that this is about working with so many partners across our community. We have senior leadership at the table, but this is a new way of doing business. United Way's come to the table, but a little bit, and as has the District of Sauk, and the City of Langford is also considering this, that we ask for your support to support this important work moving forward. How's that?
Thank you. That was great. Thank you, Cindy.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Okay, just confirming we don't have anybody else in public participation. Staff?
No, we do not have anyone else.
Okay, great. So let's move to new business then, 7.1. This is a Colwood cleanup. This is a recommendation from the February 8th Special Committee of the Whole. Councillor Baxter, are you moving the motion?
No, I can do if you like, but I have questions for staff.
Okay, sure. We'll do questions and then I'll look for a motion after questions. So no
Okay.
comments, just questions.
What is the cost per taxpayer if we were to go ahead with this service this year?
Who would like to answer that question? Sure, Mo. Go ahead, Ms. Mobeen.
Thanks, Your Worship. To answer Councillor Baxter's question, the net costs of the Colwood cleanup event, so when we take expenses less the revenues that would be generated from it, are $27,700. That equates to a 0.17% tax increase, or $1.36 per resident based on the BC Stats estimated 2022 population.
Okay, so maybe about $3 per household. What would be the, sorry, what was the cost we did charge users of this service in the last year that we did it?
Mr. Boyle, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'll take over from Marley because it's a public works kind of a thing. The average cost was about $40 per user in 2019, and the subsidy was about $27,700. The complete answer, I'd like to make sure that you asked a question about what it was per resident. You also have to take into factor that there was only about 600 and some odd users of the service.
Right, yeah, what I was getting at there is that, all the residents are paying for it, and they're obviously each paying about $3 if it goes ahead. And sorry, everybody who uses it pays an average of about $40 in fees to use the service for one visit.
Sorry,
Yeah, right?
sorry, Councillor Baxter. I don't believe that that's correct. I believe that was the cost that it was costing the city. Mr. Boyle, could you reconfirm how much is the drop-off fee when people come that day? Is it $10 per truck?
No, the minimum charge is $20. Small pickup is $30. Standard pickup or trailer is $40. Oversized loads were $60. Large appliances were $20 a piece, and appliances with refrigeration were $25 a piece. Those were the last rates in 2019.
Okay, thank you. And that would compare with, if you were to take it to landfill, it would be about $110 a ton. What would you say that a standard pickup would carry, Mr. Boyle? You got any estimation on that?
Yes, we did a little bit of quick calculations. I'm sorry, it's not going to be accurate, but we figured it would cost the average load that was coming to Colwood about $40 more to go to a other distribution site.
Okay, sorry, was that $43 more?
About $40. Sorry,
Not
not
$40 more. Okay.
rough numbers. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. That's great. That's all the questions I have, Your Honor.
Great, thank you. Councillor Kobayashi.
Worship.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Just another quick question, Marley, then. Just hearing what I'm saying, hearing the facts here, could we just not raise the dumpage fees then so that it's a net zero game here? Wouldn't that be a logical thing to do? You know, so everyone gets their, you know, it's that compromise that everyone gets their wish. Wouldn't it be a reasonable thing? You know, if you compare the prices, we jack it up a little bit so it's net zero. So there is no impact to taxpayers. So I'm just asking that question.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Kobayashi, the expenses related to the Colwood cleanup are just over 45,000, and then when we budget, we expect to take in about 17,800 in revenue. So in order to, and I'm just doing the math in my head right now, we would have to, I'd say, more than double the current rates that we're charging in order to make up that difference, if I'm understanding you correctly, so that we would have expenses and the revenue for the event equal zero. So if we're collecting 17,800, we would need to collect the full 45,500 in revenue from the users that are using that service in order to make it cost neutral to the rest of the taxpayers.
So that's still less, if I understood you right, Mr. Boyle, that's still less than you would if you were to go to the dump and do this then. Is that correct then? Even if we doubled? Mr. Boyle? Through the chair?
Go ahead, yes, Mr. Boyle.
Through the chair. It's a touchy thing. I mean, when you start thinking about it, take a load to a distribution, I can't use a name, so I'm going to use a distribution center where you separate your load and they will not charge you for metals. They won't charge you for recyclables. They'll charge you for waste. It's really depends on how you want to bring your load to that place. And then they'll decide how they're going to bill you. Okay. And I say this because I've experienced myself. Colwood hasn't done their cleanup for 2 years. Awesome. It's just the way it goes. So you have the option of reducing the cost. We did a cost analysis based on the average load that was coming in, and we figured that it was basically about a $40 some odd per load more if somebody was going to go to a distribution center and just dump it off. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So it's a convenience thing. So I certainly don't want to take that convenience away, you know, the way my thinking, but you know, if you could do it for sort of similar costs, I just don't understand why we just don't charge more, and then we can get out of this debate.
So I'm just going to stick myself in, and I might look to Councillor Logan for some historical information as well. But I believe Councillor Kobayashi, and this was even before my time, was that it started to stop people from dropping like their fridges just off the side of the road, and to actually give people, it's because what was happening is we were having a lot of public works time spent picking up garbage because people were just dumping. And so that we provided that and tried to subsidize the cost to discourage that. I don't know, perhaps our community's become sophisticated enough that we're not dumping on the side of the road appliances and that anymore, but I'm not sure. I see Councillor Baxter's hand up. Councillor Baxter?
Well, yeah, Your Worship, I just wanted to make the same point that there is a benefit to the city in two ways by providing a bit of a subsidy on this. One is that it persuades property owners, you know, it gives them a day and a good price on which they can clean up the junk on their property. And I'll admit that I've got a piece of concrete and wood mixed together sitting in front of my side gate here, just waiting for the cleanup day. and so it provides that day where, you know, people clean up their yards, which helps the city look better. And it also doesn't stop everybody maybe from dumping in inappropriate places, but it certainly gives everybody an easier opportunity than driving off to Heartland Landfill to get rid of their rubbish that won't go in the bin, get rid of it in an appropriate manner. So I think there's some advantage, hard to actually prove, hard to assess exactly how much advantage, but I think there is some advantage to providing a bit of a subsidy for this service.
Thank you. Councillor Logan, and then I'll go to Mr. Boyle.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I concur, and yes, you're right, Mayor Martin. That was one of the reasons why we had the spring cleanup, was to alleviate some of the pressures of people dumping their crap off the side of the road, frankly. And it's become a service that people have come to love, and they missed it last year. And I will say that I've used it, and I've taken a number of loads to the transfer station this year as well. And I can say that the average weight of a standard truck is and the cost is comparable to what we are charging. The difference is if we're not weighing people coming into the spring cleanup. So that's where the transfer stations get you. If you have heavy loads, you're going to be paying through the nose for that heavy load. And you don't bring appliances, metals, and that sort of thing and get weighed, because you're going to get charged for it. So this is definitely a convenience, and we've seen some of the feedback we've been getting from residents actually this past week about how they're clamoring for it. So and I'd be interested to know if we're picking up more couches as a result of not having it over the last couple of years. So anyways, I'll leave it at that. I of course support the cleanup.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle, and then Councillor Jansen.
Thank you. Through the chair, the question of whether we've experienced increased dumping on the side of the road. No, we have not. We validate that quite often. I mean, there's always things that get dumped off the side, but it has not increased significantly as far as the service that we provided. And historically, I think Mayor Martin, you had asked. Yes, I remember, and I've been around long enough to have experienced that, but I don't believe when it was first incorporated some 15 odd years ago or plus, that the services were available around in this area. So there wasn't transfer stations, there wasn't private industry, there wasn't people available to come pick it up in your yard. There have been a few people that have called and said that they have those services available to people if they want to take a load of stuff to the truck, to the dump, and they don't have a truck.
That's just thank you. Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Jansen. But just before I do, Council, I do just want to make us aware that we do have a significant in-camera this evening. So it would be nice to expedite this meeting as best we can. But I do want to have a thorough conversation. Councillor Jansen.
Thank you. I will move the motion as presented, just to kick us off there, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder to that motion? Councillor Kobayashi has seconded it. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, just to add my 2 cents worth, there are many ways to get rid of rubbish in our community. I think we have become more sophisticated as a society, and the CRD runs a wonderful facility. And half of what you think might be garbage actually ends up in a recycling bin out there. And we take an 8x10 trailer out there, and it's between $20 and $30 for a full trailer. So if we are going to charge $50, $60, $70, $80 for a trailer, it's, in my opinion, would be cost prohibitive. Yes, it's a bit of a pain to get out there, but as long as you plan accordingly, there's lots of options. And I guarantee you that half of what people are throwing. Oh, the other piece is staff time. We can't just send this stuff out to the CRD without it being sorted. So next thing you know, we got staff trying to sort out the plastics and what have you. And quite frankly, I just think we moved beyond this. It was a nicety I would much rather see us firmly support the branch drop off. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi, then Parkinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Even though I second this, I thought maybe we can just come up with a compromise on this. I would like to see the tipping fees just raised, somewhat. I don't know what that number is, Marley, to be competitive, but obviously we're trying to minimize our tax list to our taxpayers, and something reasonable so that we can maybe offset some of these costs would be a good idea. So I guess what I'm requesting here is, the compromise on this to me, so that I can fully support it, is to look at a dollar value here, which is reasonable. Maybe it's $30, as Councillor Jensen has suggested right now. Everything's going to help so that this doesn't go directly onto all the taxpayers. Because personally, I happen to live in a strata, so I pay for it twice. Not only do I get a tax lift, but I have to pay for my own right now for the people that come and look after our strata. So that I'm getting double taxed. So philosophically, I look at it from this point of view.
So now, Councillor Kobayashi, you, when Mr. Boyle was speaking, he basically had different price points. There was a car, and then it was a small pickup, and the price basically escalated at, to a certain point. Are you suggesting that we just add $10 to every price point? Was that what your suggestion was? I'm not putting words in your mouth.
Yes, okay. Yes, I am. Just based on what Councillor Jensen said, I'm going to anecdotally assume that he's given me correct information.
Okay. So that would be an amendment to this motion. I will look for a seconder.
Point of order,
yes.
Your Worship.
Go ahead. Yep. Go ahead, Councillor Beck.
The motion is to remove the program.
Thank you. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So it's completely wrong. You're right. I apologize. I can't amend that. We'll have to defeat that if you're absolutely right. So I will come back to Councillor Kobayashi if this motion, which is to remove it from the budget, fails. So you're dead on. Councillor Parkinson. And then Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Worship. I'm going to vote against this. I think that's kind of what a community is. There are some things that some people get more advantage of than others. A lot of us on council here don't have kids in school. We still pay school taxes. So I think that this is one where, it's obviously beneficial to somebody. I mean, you guys all saw the emails this week, and it's probably up in a high percentage of feedback we've got on any issue in the last 3 years. It's a convenience. It's helpful. Like you, Councillor Kobayashi, I live in a strata, and when they bring that bin in, it's a treat. So I can see why, the rest of the community does. I don't use the one at City Hall. I don't use the schools. That's why we have a community, so we can get together and do things for everybody. So I'm opposed to this. And please, let's not get into a debate over how much more we should charge a pickup versus a small car versus this. I trust our staff to watch these things and to run the city efficiently, and to, if there's an opportunity or an appropriate time to bump the rates a little bit, I don't think they have to come to us to ask that. But even if we had all the time in the world, Your Worship, to discuss that, I don't think that's the council decision time well spent. So as I said, I'll vote against the motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Logan, do you, no, okay, good. So what I'm going to do is call the question on the original motion then, and we'll move that forward, because I believe it's going to. So the recommendation is that the Colwood cleanup program be removed from the budget. Those in opposition, please raise your hands. Councillors Parkinson, Baxter, Logan, and Martin oppose, so that motion fails. Do I have? I will clear hands. Do I have a? Do I have a motion? Oh, what's going on here? Okay, Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Worship. I'll move that that the Colwood cleanup program be included in the 2022 budget, and staff determine the appropriate rate.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder to that motion? Seconded by Councillor Baxter. Thank you. Discussion. Councillor Baxter was the seconder, so I'll go Baxter and then Councillor Kobayashi if you have any comments.
No, I'm good.
Okay, Councillor Kobayashi.
So just to clarify it, Councillor Logan, so yeah, I do agree with you. We can let the staff figure this out, but I guess that number isn't going to be that number, obviously, right? So you're going to have to do another estimation of your budget and what that lift is going to cost. Am I correct, through the mayor to Marley? Am I correct? I just want to be clear.
Your worship, through to Councillor Kobayashi. It's certainly something that we can discuss with the public works manager to ensure that potentially some additional costs are covered with that revenue. But knowing that unless we have direction from council to make it a cost neutral activity, there will still be some tax burden with respect to covering some of the expenses for the cleanup event.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, Councillor Kobayashi, but I'm just going to continue. The floor is still yours. It's just I'd like Mr. Earl to comment on how do we support council to address the issue of what that subsidy number should be, because it sounds like that's where Councillor Kobayashi is coming from with that question.
That's correct.
Thank you, Mayor Martin. And Ms. Boving, was it a $27,000 net cost? Is that correct?
Yes, your worship, through to Mr. Earl, the net cost was $27,700. That was originally included in the 2022 budget.
Thank you. So at this juncture, staff will bring forward a 2022 budget with almost a $28,000 tax support of this service. If council has a different idea of the rate of subsidy, if you'd like the 28,000 reduced to 25,000 or 20,000 or 15,000, you could give that direction and we would estimate a fee that would generate that amount of tax support. That said, it would be an estimate based on what we think might come in the door in terms of revenue and how we think those costs would manifest.
And when would that be most appropriate to do? Would that be appropriate to do tomorrow?
At this moment.
In budget? Right now. So unlike Councillor Parkinson's discussion where you didn't want to talk about it right now, you're telling us we should address it now. So I will give the floor back to Councillor Kobayashi. Councillor Kobayashi.
Okay, so yeah, you want a swag? Swag, $15,000 is the subsidy that I would suggest. And let's see where it falls. That's my motion.
Okay. So I'm sorry. So the subsidy is 15,000 should be the cost to the city.
Yes, net, okay. Right.
Net cost to the city. Okay. Do I have a seconder to that? I do not. Okay. What else would we like to do with this? It sounds like we don't want to deal with it. All right, then we will move on. I think that's enough direction. We've said to leave it in, and unless staff need any other direction from council, I will move on to 7.2. No, okay. 7.2, this is Rachel Buskey. This is our Economic Recovery Program Coordinator regarding the Low Carbon Resilience Program update. Ms. Buskey.
Hello, good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for giving me the time to present information on the Low Carbon Resilience Project. You may be aware that this project was launched during February. This project will create a greenhouse gas inventory for the City of Colwood and a climate action plan. We currently have a low carbon resilience public consultation survey launched on the Let's Talk platform. If people would like to consider completing this survey, that would be super. This evening, I would like to introduce you to Peter Robinson and Robin Webb, from the Community Energy Association, who will be presenting a PowerPoint presentation on this project. Peter Robinson is the Director of Climate Planning and Research and the Chief Technology Officer for the Community Energy Association, and has delivered 51 community and 13 corporate energy and emissions plans, creating and updating energy and emissions inventories. And Peter is a research advisor for the Community Energy Planning. Robin Webb is CEA's Community Solutions Lead and has worked on climate action for over 12 years in Manitoba, Alberta and BC. Prior to joining the CEA, Robin worked for the cities of Victoria and Edmonton on climate policy program implementation for over 8 years. And with that, I would like to hand over to Peter and Robin.
Thank you so much, Rachel. So good evening, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. I'd just like to confirm how long do we have to present for, bearing in mind we need to leave some time for comments and questions and things like that.
Yeah, if I would say, I'm not sure what staff told you. I mean, ideally, if we can keep it about 10 minutes and then we can go to questions, that would be great. But if it's longer than that, then
no, that's exactly I was just confirming. That's exactly the idea we had already. Brilliant. So just going to be discussing the Low Carbon Resilience Project. And thank you so much for having us. This is a partnership between our organization, the Community Energy Association, and Flipside Sustainability, who they're actually the developers of the low carbon resilience concept. And so we're very, very happy to be partnering with them. This is not the first time we partnered with them, and certainly hope it won't be the last time. So today's presentation, we're going to be doing a quick overview of the project objectives, the deliverables, and also just gather some questions and feedback from you all. So a quick overview of the project. So you do have some real climate risks to the community, but you also have some real opportunities. Our approach in this project is going to be through engagement, review of all the different pieces that are in place, create a greenhouse gas emissions inventory and do some modeling. Our deliverables are going to be a terms of reference for the city on the climate implications of city decisions. A look at some greenhouse gas and resilience impacts of some forthcoming city projects. But the main deliverable really is a low carbon resilience climate action plan. Everything will be completed by the end of May. So this just is a quick kind of snapshot of the project plan. So as you can see, it's very tight. We're going to be wrapping everything up by the end of May because it's a very high priority project. The engagement phase goes on for almost the entire duration of the project. We also have something called assessment, which is basically kind of reviewing the pieces in place, doing the inventory and modeling work. We have plan writing, review cycles, and you can see the timelines for the 3 staff and stakeholder workshops under engagement lower down on the screen. The first staff and stakeholder workshop is actually this Wednesday, and they're going to be going on so then the following Wednesday, and then there's a 2-week break, and then the last one. Public survey number 1 is already operational, as Rachel said, and public survey number 2, you can see the timeline, the expected timeline for that. And you can also see the timeline for the 2 council meetings. That's obviously we're having one right now, and the second one will be the anticipated date for that should be in May. But what is low carbon resilience? So essentially, a lot of communities already have plans that look at mitigation and plans that look at adaptation. So mitigation is trying to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So doing our part to work on this problem of climate change. Adaptation is about managing the risks that are going to be happening because things are going to be happening no matter what at this point. So, and also we don't exactly know what the rest of the world is going to do. So if the rest of the world doesn't move in the same way as BC is, then we're still going to have a lot of risks to plan for as well. But even without that, even with all the best intentions and the best effort all around the world, there's still a very high chance that we're going to have to be dealing with these risks coming forward. So low carbon resilience is essentially a way of doing both of these plans at the same time. So if you look at this quadrant, and I know we're short on time, so we just have a short presentation. So I'm just going to get to the main nitty gritty of everything. So there's ways of dealing with things which are high in emissions. There's ways of dealing with things that are high in risk. There's ways of dealing with things that will be both in low emissions and low risks. If you look at that quadrant, we want to be in the top right, coordinated planning, dealing with things where we minimize our risks and we minimize our emissions. For communities, especially small and mid-sized communities, if you had, if you're a very large community, you probably have completely different people, or a lot of different people working on, say, the mitigation side and adaptation side. And yes, it could make sense to have separate plans, but small and mid-sized communities, you're going to have a lot of the same staff around the table, a lot of the same stakeholders around the table. So basically, if we can combine mitigation and adaptation together, you don't have to have as many workshops. You can have fewer workshops. There can be less time for things like writing. There can be less staff time is taken up, less consultants time. So essentially, you can get this done quicker and easier and cheaper. And you can have one plan at the end, rather than most communities working in this have two plans. You can have one. So it just it's easier to track. You have fewer actions that need to be implemented. The city of Port Moody, this quotation from Port Moody, basically by pursuing one of these integrated processes, LCR planning processes, rather than the 3 different ones they had been thinking of, they saved what they thought was about 50% of funds in 1 year of staff time, or 1 year of time. So anyway, so they found a significant benefit, and we think the city of Colwood will as well. So an LCR lens, basically, I already mentioned the reducing emissions, reducing risks and vulnerability. So again, just getting to the real nut of this slide. So we also focus in on the co-benefits. So what are the co-benefits that a community will see from these actions? Health, equity, biodiversity, economic savings, clean development, and so on. This slide here, again, just to get the nuts of it, the image here just gives a good sense of the kind of co-benefits, kind of a livable, healthy community where everyone can live, whether they're 8 years old or 80 years old. You don't need to be 30 years old and in perfect health to get around, and you don't need to, don't have to afford a vehicle either. So on the co-benefit side of things, this gives a comprehensive sense of the different co-benefits that we will be considering as part of the plan. And a good example, and this is also a very timely example, because you're about to look at it, is urban forest. So urban forest, straight away, the sense that you get from this kind of an image is, I'd like to live on that street. I'd like to live in that neighborhood or in that community. And this is a BC community, isn't it? It's a BC image. And so that is a good example of that's going to be from a climate risk perspective. It's going to reduce your urban heat island effect. Those trees will also help to reduce issues around stormwater. And there's some numbers behind that we've been given for the province of BC in terms of stormwater impacts and absorbing stormwater. And it's also they will also absorb and retain some carbon as well. And there's a lot of different environmental co-benefits. So for example, the environmental co-benefits to the bottom right, almost every one of those is going to be achieved through urban forest. So that's kind of a timely example, because we're also going to be looking at urban forest and right now. And so to the extent that we've actually included a bunch of urban forest questions as well in our low carbon resilience survey. You have a lot of you as a municipality, we feel like you really need to give yourselves a great big pat on the back as well. You've put a lot of pieces in place for your low carbon resilience plan. And so we've been looking at these, we've been doing what we call taking stock, kind of looking at all the different pieces that you have in place and looking to see how they fit together. And there's so many things here, like we don't have time, but you do have copies of these slides, I think, or we'll be having copies of these slides. There's so many different things that are being included in terms of the considerations for your LCR plan. And again, on the pat on the back, so you have a lot of climate actions that have been in place. The image gives an idea of the regional EV charging network, including Colwood and downtown Victoria. And so, electric vehicle charging obviously has to be done in the region, and you're definitely not falling behind. So with climate action, we've been doing great work, but all of us, every community in BC also has more work to do still. You've been on new buildings, you've been looking at already implemented the BC Energy Step Code. Existing buildings, you were a climate leader a number of years ago with Solar Colwood. You are leading right now with Bring It Home for the Climate, and you have heat pump and heat pump water heater top-ups as well. On transportation, active transportation and transit, you've been working on that, and working on electric vehicles. You have some great community partners as well, and local volunteer organizations, and Royal Roads University, who also have just come out with a brand new climate plan as well. So you're in a great position to move forward, and that's really kind of the bottom line to this slide. And just hand it over to Robin, who's just going to take us through the next few slides. And Robin, just let me know when you want me to advance.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Peter. We wanted to give you a little bit of context of what's happening at both the federal and the provincial context that will ultimately impact some of the actions in Colwood's plan. You know, climate action is really one of those interesting areas to work in, as it is a responsibility of all levels of government. And sometimes there even a lack of uncertainty around the jurisdictional authority on who should lead on certain initiatives that we're seeing. So you can see on the left, the Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change was the federal government's climate plan that was recently just actually updated just this past July. And Clean BC is the province of BC's climate strategy that was just actually updated last month. So the timing of your strategy is quite good, as we have newly updated commitments from both senior levels of government that help to inform sort of where some of the gaps are and what role the local government can play in advancing climate actions. So if we move on to the next slide, this slide is just showing you what some of the committed actions are from the provincial and federal level that we actually take into account in our emissions modeling when we're doing that for Colwood. So for instance, today we have investments in heat pump incentives from both the province of BC and from the federal government with the Greener Homes Grant. And as Peter mentioned, you guys are providing top-ups to those. We also have in 2022, STEP code becomes the provincially mandated building code, and 20% energy efficiency will be achieved through all new construction from what the base code was prior to that. We're also seeing the federal government is working on a national model retrofit code. So that will be the first of its kind that applies to existing buildings. And the province of BC actually has made a similar commitment. So even if the federal government doesn't advance that model code, the province of BC is going to adopt a building code for existing buildings in 2024. There are also targets for zero emissions vehicles. In 2025, we see 10% of sales have to be zero emissions. That goes up in 2030 to 40%. And actually, with the newest update to Clean BC, that 100% target actually was moved back to 2035 even. So again, these are some of the things that we account for in the modeling. The province has also made commitments around 95% of organics should be diverted from landfills by 2030, and that renewable natural gas will account for about 15% of the gas supply in BC. Another update that we saw as part of the newest Clean BC roadmap to 2030 was they advanced a target of an 80% reduction in energy use in new buildings from 2032 to a zero emissions target for new buildings at 2030. So we're seeing with each iteration of the province's plans that they're starting to accelerate action as well. So if we move on to the next slide, another thing that we really wanted to draw your attention to, because it's a real rarity in BC, is just that Colwood is really well positioned to move on climate because the CRD actually has a climate action service that was established in 2009. There are very few regional districts across BC that have something similar. Metro Vancouver is really the only other one. So with their recently updated climate strategy, and I know that you guys very recently voted on expanding the levy that goes to the CRD so that they can provide more services to Colwood in terms of a regional retrofit service, which would provide more of that coaching to residents and a regional EV charging roadmap. But also we're starting to see the CRDs doing some coordinating meetings regarding STEP code with all of the local governments in the region, trying to aim for similar timelines on the advancement of the different levels of the steps. So again, just you're in a good position to be able to work in concert with your neighbors and save money and resources as a result of being able to do that. So if we move on to the next slide, we just wanted to contextualize what's going on in the region for you even more. The CRD does tracking of the different climate action initiatives that are happening across the region. And now that Colwood is doing some work on electric vehicles and e-bike charging, and with the creation of this climate plan, if we click to the next slide, we see that puts you, really in a position of leadership in the region with Victoria and Saanich. So again, as Peter said, kudos, you guys are doing a lot of great work, and we're really excited to be working on this plan with you to push that forward even more. So I'll pass it back to Peter.
Great, thanks, Robin. And I just have a couple of slides, so very nearly wrapped up. So just next steps on the project. So survey number 1, as Rachel said, is out. So please complete it and please get it out through your channels. It is up on the city's website right now, and the city's low carbon resilience page is up. Survey number 2 will be coming in March. Our workshop dates, March 2nd, March 9th, March 23rd. All of those are going to be from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And any questions or comments going forward, please go through Rachel Buskey. And with that, just like to say thank you very much. And we are very excited to be working on this plan with you guys. And do you have any questions for us?
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation. I will look to council. Unfortunately, sorry, would you mind not sharing your screen? I can't see hands, unfortunately. If do we have any questions? I have one, and I guess I'm looking for a comment. I guess I'm just starting to worry when I start to see some of the. Robin, you had mentioned 2030. The province has aspirations for 40% of car sales to be electric. But by 2035, which is only 5 years later, they're hoping to have 100%. And did I read that correctly on that slide, or did I misinterpret what you were saying there?
By 2035, both the provincial mandate and now the federal mandate are actually 100% of car sales will be electric vehicles by 2035.
And that's,
okay,
that's light duty vehicles.
Yeah.
All light duty vehicles.
So right now, I'm ballparking it, but I believe we have somewhere between 10 and 12 public charging stations. And we have 5,000 households. And if we said each household had 2 vehicles, that's 10,000 cars just for the city of Colwood, with 12 public charging stations. And then we're going to see an escalation of 40% of sales in 2030. And then within 5 years, we're going to see 100%. How, and maybe this isn't a question to you, and maybe this is a question to staff, how do we plan on supporting the infrastructure to support that many vehicles that are electrified?
I think we can answer that if you don't mind, because
Sure.
Actually we were recently approached by the Capital Regional District. Again, one of their initiatives is to roll out a regional charging network across the area. And so we are helping them write a grant that will go to the province of BC Clean Communities Fund, and it is for a significant amount of charging infrastructure for the area. So that's one point. I guess the second point would be, if you pass that electric vehicle readiness bylaw in new construction, that it means that you're future-proofing the new buildings in Colwood, so that they can easily get EV infrastructure in, it's especially important for multi-unit residential buildings where the costs are really high to retrofit afterwards. But also for your residents who live in single-family dwellings, it's quite cost effective to install a charging station there, and there are incentive programs from Clean BC that help residents to transition right now too. So there are a number of different things underway, I suppose.
It might also be worth. Oh, so it might also be worth mentioning quickly. We're already at 13% of new vehicle sales in BC are already electric.
Okay. Great, thank you. And sorry, and this is a provincial question, but is the province confident that they'll be able to meet the electrical needs of the province in 2035 if we've completely electrified our I realize it's not completely electrified because it's just sails, but where does the province sit with that in Site C?
I'm happy to take this question, but Robin, feel free to jump in. And so the province, there is obviously debate around this particular topic. You know, the province and BC Hydro do have a lot of confidence around this. We currently have excess electrical capacity, and with Site C coming on, we'll have even more excess electrical capacity. There is debate in the community. There are academics who say, well, we need to start planning for new generation at this point. I read a paper recently that said we need to start planning for roughly another 700 wind turbines by, I think it was within about 10 years or so. Now, if planning starts now, 700 wind turbines, is not really a very big deal. It's when you look at, for example, the amount of wind infrastructure that, say, the United Kingdom has installed, which is a quarter the size of BC and has over 10 times the population, they easily install this much offshore alone all the time. So it's
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, smarter people than me will figure that out. I'm going to go to Councillor Kobayashi, then Parkinson, then Baxter, just so that everybody knows. Councillor Kobayashi.
Yep. Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you very much, Peter and Robin, for the presentation. Great presentation. So it's a question that I have. Does your low carbon resilience project actually, like, to me, there's got to be a pincer on this, like a pincer move. Right now, you're addressing the standard things that every one of the environmental plans are, and the deliverables, metrics, good stuff. But there's this other factor, that soft factor, because you keep on saying, hey, we all aware of this, but why do our GHGs still go up? And what I always say is this, the human factor side of this right now. And that is, how do we change people's behaviors? Is that addressed in this low carbon resilience project, or do you not tackle that? Because I think that's a very important aspect of trying us, for us to actually succeed in getting to net zero. Just comments on that.
For sure, we can include actions that look specifically at getting the word out, for example, within the community. And in fact, now that to a certain extent, perhaps we're already doing that through the first public survey and through the LCR page. So yeah, we can absolutely, well, we already will have actions on that within the LCR plan. We can look at strengthening that component.
Great, thank you. Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Worship. So I noticed in here, one of your slides, you talk about your understanding real climate risks, but real opportunities. Obviously, there's some results. I mean, if everybody electrifies, the air is better. If we plant more trees, it's a nicer place to walk. But opportunities, as opposed to just results from doing the right thing, will you be looking at, are there any real opportunities, or is it just the results of the steps you take?
An example of an opportunity, and actually we've already brought this to the attention of staff, for example, one particular, so you can bring in more funding into a community. So, and that can help you to meet obviously your climate goals, but also meet other community goals as well. So one example would be the recent re-release of the Clean Communities Fund. So the Clean Communities Fund allows a municipality, a local government regional district, to reduce its, basically to improve the energy efficiency of its buildings that are, used a lot by the public. So for example, community centers would be an example of that. And, or recreation centers are another example. And so that will allow you to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but allow you to meet other community goals as well, such as reducing costs for taxpayers, providing better value for money to the tax base. And so, because then you'll be able to provide the same services within that building for a lower energy cost. So just as an example of an opportunity there. Another example would be, bringing in other sorts of funding, working more on, say, the retrofit programs. and ensuring you kind of keep energy costs low for households in the community going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter? Councillor Baxter, on mute.
Thank you. First time I've done that for a while. I just want to comment on your comment, Your Worship, about all these extra cars coming into the community and whether we'll have enough chargers. I mean, essentially every home in BC can already charge an electric car at the level 1 rate, and you know, having owned an electric car for 10 years, more than 10 years now, you don't need chargers in your own community because you charge at home. You need chargers when you're traveling. And the reason we need and have had for years now chargers in Colwood is actually to attract travelers, attract tourists, and create revenue that way. So that was the one point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands, so thank you again for the presentation today. We look forward to seeing next steps. Rachel, did you have anything else before I move on? Oh, no, her camera went on, so I'm going to guess not. So thank you again. So we're going to move on now to 7.3. This is Jill Collingson, our senior planner, and this is their 2021 summary of participation in the Clean BC Better Homes Rebate Program and 2022 funding considerations.
Your Worship. So you heard it mentioned in the previous speakers about the Clean BC programs, and one of those is the Clean BC Better Homes Rebate Program, which Colin participated in for the first time in 2021. So I'm here to offer a brief summary of what happened last year, as well as seek direction for 2022 funding consideration. So last year, for 2021, a total of $20,000 was allocated from the Climate Action Reserve Fund to support municipal top-up initiatives. We initially allocated $10,000, and then due to program popularity, an additional $10,000 was allocated during the summer months. So the report in front of you offers a brief summary. Table 1 shows the expenditures by quarter. By far, the summer period was the most access time of the year for funds. This is largely because there is an uptake in program participation, typically during your first few heat events. Suddenly people would like to enjoy the spoils of air conditioning that come along with the heat pump. So that's somewhat of the justification for the uptake during summer months. And then table 2 in the report summarizes the type of top-ups that were available and which ones were accessed. And you will see that by far, the fuel switch air source heat pump was the most popular. You'll see the number for that was 28, which pairs perfectly with the number for the contractor incentive, because installation is required by a certain type of contractor, and so that wraps together quite nicely. So at the end of the year, $14,500 of the $20,000 allocated for this had been spent. So there's $5,500 remaining for 2022. So tonight, we're asking for direction regarding funding. So within the report, there's 3 options, essentially to top it up to $10,000 for the 2022 year, which would be an additional $5,500, to top it up to $15,000, which would be an additional $9,500, or no top up whatsoever. So I will leave it at that, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Jansen, then Baxter.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I think after our previous discussion here, it behooves us to put our money where our mouth is, or where the cold air is, I guess, at this point. But I do believe if we didn't go through it all last year, I'd be supportive of the $10,000 motion there, Your Worship. Okay, great. So the recommendation, it is in the agenda that council allocates an additional $4,500, which would top it up to the $10,000 amount. Did I read that correctly, Ms. Collington? Because I thought I heard you said that we needed to top it up $5,500.
Yes, you did read that correctly. So essentially there was $14,500 spent, which leaves a remainder of, oh wait, where am I doing my math here? Yeah, an additional $4,500 So 4,500 plus 5,500 is the 10,000. So that would be $10,000 for the 2022 year.
Great, thank you. So I have Councillor Jansen's motion. Councillor Baxter, you have your hand up. Are you willing to second that motion?
No, because unlike the very stingy Councillor Jansen, I was going to move option 2.
Okay, well, I'll come back to you then. Just for discussion, I'll move the motion to keep us going. So discussion, I will go to Councillor Jansen. Did you want to say anything else?
Well, I was just going to say, I do remember us topping this up kind of mid-year last year, and I would envisage an opportunity to top up once again if we do find that these funds are being used. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. As a seconder, I will concur with that response. I certainly don't mind us topping it up to 15,000, but I think staff could come back with that, and that hence the reason why I seconded it. Councillor Baxter.
Well, I guess I can't say I'm going to oppose this motion since it gets us partway to the goal. And Councillor Jensen's absolutely right. I'm sure staff will come back to us if there's signs of the money running out, and we can put some more money to it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'm going to call the question. Those in opposition, I'm just going to lower Councillor Baxter's hand. I don't believe he is opposing it. So any in opposition, please raise your virtual hand. Nobody opposes. Thank you. Thank you, staff. Moving on to 7.4. This is Mr. Vorhill regarding our heritage strategy project update. Mr. Vorhill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And apologies, I'm just dealing with some technical issues this evening, so if anything happens to my video or audio, I do apologize. So this item is to provide council with an update on the Colwood Heritage Strategy Project. Council has directed the creation of a new comprehensive heritage strategy as one of Colwood's primary strategic priorities. And the city's project team, including heritage planning consultants led by Maria Stanborough, a registered professional planner with CNS Planning Group, has been working with the Colwood Heritage Commission to achieve this. The Heritage Strategy Project was preceded by the successful review of the Colwood Heritage Inventory last year, and once completed will be used to guide the creation of a new heritage registry, which is scheduled for the second half of 2022. The Colwood Heritage Commission is the steering body for this work and has been engaged by the project team on several occasions via virtual meetings and a virtual workshop. With that, I'd like to ask that Ms. Stanborough be given the floor to provide a presentation on tasks completed to date in this project and a summary of the initial engagement with public stakeholders in other jurisdictions. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for letting me present tonight. I will present a brief update of the report that I believe you have received. And I know you have a busy agenda tonight, so it will be, I promise you, a brief update. Am I up to sharing my screen here? Is that, Amanda, do I have that?
Yes, you should be able to share your screen.
Okay, great. So I've got a PowerPoint presentation for you, and let's see if this is going to work. And there we go.
Yeah,
so,
we can see it.
Great, excellent. So as mentioned, my name is Maria Stanborough. I'm from CNS Planning Group. We partnered with Lees and Associates on the heritage strategy, as well as Gwen Bridge, who I will speak a little bit more to in the presentation. So this is a mid-project report. And how did we get here? Well, we're here at the end of February, and everything to the left of the screen here is work that has been completed and that I will touch on in the presentation today. And at the last slide, I'll talk about a little bit about next steps as well. In terms of the work we've done, we did a review of a number of local government plans from Colwood, as well as looking at the heritage inventory and the update in 2021, and other examples from local governments of the work being done. This is also ongoing. And we did also read some local historical documents such as Terror of the Coast and the Colwood Chronicles to inform our background research. And I'm very pleased to say that your planning documents have fantastic reference to heritage in them, and they provide a good foundation for us to pull from the OCP to refer to policy and to really give a context for how to explore that and how to maximize the benefit there. On November 26th, we did a workshop with the Community Heritage Commission, and it was a 2-hour workshop, very engaged commission. Some key ideas that came from the workshop were the complexity and layers of heritage. And I'll say this is a theme going through the research that we did, and a real appreciation for the idea that heritage has many perspectives, many histories, and many understandings. The resources of the CHC members themselves is fantastic. You've got local history, archives, people from Royal Roads, people with very solid understanding of provincial legislation, and arts and culture also represented. And there are a number of themes that were emerging that can help shape the heritage strategy. So one of the key ones was travel routes with the Galloping Goose Trail, sort of the formation, the change of that over time, and the Maritime Trail that is from time immemorial to the present, how it's been used. There are places with many meanings. This goes back to the complexity and layers. So Hatley Castle in the grounds, the waterfront. There's the idea of the settler community formation for the city of Colwood itself. How will the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, its calls to action and UNDRIP be applied toward heritage? That's something we'll explore in the heritage strategy, as well as ecological heritage, environment, and sustainability. We're doing ongoing outreach to the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. So Gwen Bridge is a project advisor on the heritage strategy. She's an Indigenous consultant with 10 years expertise in Indigenous and non-Indigenous government relations. And through her direction, she has really recommended that we look at focusing on a partnership and how to provide benefit to the local First Nations, because as we all know, there are a lot of demands on their time and their expertise. So we're looking to work with them to identify sites of significant cultural heritage and how we might work together to protect and recognize these areas, as well as building recognition of Indigenous cultures of the area as part of ongoing local government planning, and that can be in park naming, interpretive signage, public education, and other forms. We also conducted stakeholder consultation. We broke that into 2 sections. So there was a letter that was sent to all the homeowners, every household, or all the homeowners of inventory houses for response. And we were asking them, do they have any concerns or anything that they would like to know about the heritage strategy? And we received 4 responses to the letters that went out to about 50 homeowners, and there wasn't any concerns. It was really about curiosity and wanting to know if there were benefits to them in this process. And then we also conducted interviews with stakeholders, 12 different stakeholder organizations, which included Parks Canada, Royal Roads, Tourism Victoria, the Colwood Arts and Culture Society, Royal BC Museum, the Friends of Coal Island, among others. And some of the themes that emerged from those were the Indigenous cultural heritage, a key theme, the idea of balance and layers, similar to the complexity of heritage, the real concern about the development of Colwood that has led to the loss of some of the tangible heritage. And so just really recognizing that and looking to address that in the heritage strategy. And the existing significant sites with Hatley Castle, Fort Rod Hill, the Fiskard Lighthouse, those are important places for people to come to Colwood to understand about heritage. And through that process, creating awareness and experience of heritage that's unique to Colwood, as well as developing partnerships, because you have opportunities with these large sites to work in partnership. We sent out a postcard to every household, and we were inviting people to complete a survey, and we received 88 survey responses, which is almost 2% of all households in Colwood, which is a positive response. This is an example of one of the responses that we received to the questions. And the question is, what types of heritage do you think should be recognized? And you'll see that there's a real interest in lands that are traditionally and currently used by the local First Nations for spiritual and cultural practices. And this was a theme that also was reiterated throughout the survey. And the next important in the survey responses was places that are linked to an important person in Colwood's or First Nations history. And I would say that's perhaps a more traditional route that heritage has taken in the past. And so you're really seeing sort of an emergence of I would say an innovative perspective on how to approach heritage. The next more important areas were agricultural, which I think is really interesting because that's really the foundation of where Colwood started. And then community and culture and the military history is very important. Very low on the importance is commercial and business sites. And I would say that's because you don't have a downtown or a little hub where everything sort of grew from. And I think that's recognized in the survey response. I also want to mention that we did ask about a heritage register, because that's one of the things that can also often be a point of concern or contention for local first governments. And the response we got was very positive. Most of the respondents said they were very interested in finding a way to protect and recognize Colwood's heritage. It was tempered by some responses that were really looking to have an open, a transparent process, and to make sure it's clear and that no one is, put on the heritage register if they aren't interested in being there. So that's something that we'll look at through the process as well. But it was quite positive. So in terms of next steps, we've completed the background research and the first round of public engagement. So we'll be starting to draft the heritage strategy over the next couple of weeks. We're hoping by mid-March to have a draft strategy, and then we'll workshop that with the Community Heritage Commission before we go back out to the community to get their response and their feedback, also from the stakeholders, on their thoughts and their ideas. And the next round will be also bringing, well, I guess at the end of it, we'll be bringing the final draft strategy to you for final approval. And that is the end of my presentation. I'll stop my share now, and I'm happy to answer any questions or address any concerns you might have.
Thank you. I will look to council. I don't see any hands, so I think you nailed it. We very, very much appreciate it. Mr. Brohill, do you have anything else before I move on to the next survey?
No, I do not. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the presentation today, Maria.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Okay, this takes us to 7.5. This is Ms. Bovin regarding the 2022 off-cycle grant in aid applications.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So I'll be providing a brief summary of the 2 off-cycle grant and aid applications we have received so far for 2022. The first one is from FATE, and my apologies if I am mispronouncing that, Care Charity Society. They are requesting $15,000. The Society strives to bridge the gap of food insecurity on Vancouver Island. They have a mobile food bank. That is a project that was started during the COVID-19 pandemic to address the most basic needs of those unable to travel to food banks due to physical and or financial conditions. So their request will help sustain its operations and provide funding for gas, food items, and groceries to deliver to those in need. The second application is from Healthy Schools, Healthy People Regional Network, as Council heard earlier in the meeting from Cindy. They are requesting $5,000 to assist in the support of work of 2 priority-focused work groups, one on infrastructure and space project planning, and the other on the service coordination and suicide prevention strategy. So the HSHP Regional Network is a recently formed coalition of over 30 organizations, including the City of Colwood, committed to a vision of healthy and thriving children, youth, and families across the school district number 62 catchment area. And to remind Council, we started with a $45,100 budget for grants and aid for 2022. At the January 10th meeting, Council allocated $32,900 of that budget towards the regular grant and aid applications. And so there's a total of $12,200 remaining that can be given to off-cycle applicants in 2022. That summarizes the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that may come up.
Thank you. Councillor Parkinson.
Yeah, I'd be prepared to move option 2. Do not approve any off-cycle grant and aid funding to either organization for 2022, and happy to motivate if I get a seconder.
Okay, thank you. I will, Councillor Jansen, I see your hand up. Are you seconding that motion? Councillor Jansen?
I just took my hand down. I was going to make a different motion.
All right. Okay, thank you. Councillor, I saw Councillor Kobayashi. Are you seconding that? Okay, thank you. All right, then let's go back to Councillor Parkinson. Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So council will remember the first time we took a stab at grants and aids recently after being elected, and it was just a gong show of people spending a whole bunch of time and debates on the council table. So we came up with a process of what we felt would work in the way of allocating taxpayer dollars to organizations looking for grants. And I and the rest of council this year went through all the applications that we had, tried to evaluate one against the other, determine which ones we felt were worthy of support and how much. And we came up with a number for the grants. And frankly, I don't want to go, I've got several hundred pages of stuff to read for council this week. I don't want to go back to those original grants and try to compare, gee, is this one a little better than one that was approved or not quite as good as one of the others? The process was set up to try and prevent us from going through this all the time. So that's my concern. Nothing against either of the proposals. One of them, I note, asks for consideration in the next fiscal year. It's not even asking for it in this year in reality. So there may well be merit of these things, but we have a process. Let's stick to it and deal with other issues. The second point that concerns me and I wanted to raise is, and this in the report under financial considerations, says staff will bring off-cycle applications forward for council consideration during 2022 until the budget is fully utilized. That's a different understanding than I have of what we're doing with grants. I felt that when we had gone through the list that we had initially and allocated what we allocated, that then was the budget. And if it's not as high as the original budget, then the budget should be reduced to reflect what was agreed to. I mean, we had this discussion last year about equipment replacements. Sure, we can budget on a reasonable schedule when a pickup should be replaced and when we should buy a new piece of equipment. But council's not going to go out and check the odometers on these things and look under the oil pan to see if it's leaking or not. We'll leave that to staff. And if, just because a piece of equipment is scheduled for replacement doesn't mean it gets replaced unless it needs to be replaced. So it's the same thing here. Because there was an initial budget and we didn't allocate it all, doesn't mean we should go out and look for organizations to give taxpayer money to. It means that's what we've decided, and there's a process and people can follow it, and we'll be judicious with how we pass out grants and aid on behalf of the Colwood citizens. So that's my concern here. So I'll leave it to hear from the rest of council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi, you were the seconder. Did you want to comment at all before I go to other hands?
Thank you very much, Councillor Parkinson. You've summarized it very well to me. I always thought I'm a bit of a fiscal hawk, but, I look at this as being totally discretionary funds, and it's discretionary. And I've always understood that, we left a little bit of money in the pot always, for these smaller ones, but these are pretty significant. $12,000 is pretty significant. And let me assess it against all the others. It's not fair to me. I think that this being separate, and because there's this budget, and I'll put quotation marks around that 45,000, like Councillor Parkinson has stated, doesn't mean we have to spend it. I mean, we did what we did. And if there's a little bit of, if we want to agree to set a little bit of money aside for those, those small things that we've done in the past, I think we've traditionally had between $3,000 and $5,000 extra, and so be it. We can make that decision. But these are pretty significant, and I don't want to go back and reassess all the scoring again and see who should get what. And so I don't think it's fair to the previous submitters. So I will be supporting your motion, Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Councillor Jansen.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I don't disagree with my peers, and I thought Councillor Parkinson outlined it nicely. But I was going to say, for clarity's sake, that we did discuss keeping some in reserve, or what the leftover was that would come back and kind of off-cycle application. So I'm not surprised by this, but it does seem to be a bit of a vacuum, a time vacuum when they come up, and it generates much discussion. And I do believe the point is valid that it's a more fulsome look in comparison with other grant applications. So I think that's a great point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess I'll respectfully disagree with my friends. This is exactly the process that we followed over the last few years. We've always set aside a few $1,000s to deal with these off-cycle grants. That's the same process we've used. So this is no different. But I will also point out that one of the requests from Cindy Andrew came in September 27th, 2021. So this is not a February request. This was a September request with plenty of time, and it didn't make it to us for whatever reason. Having said that, $5,000 in a multi-million-dollar budget, really? Like, really? And when we have the opportunity to leverage that $5,000 with against contributions from many other organizations to support an area that is sadly lacking in our community, and maybe only a couple of us have kids young enough that would take advantage, but it's something that that I think is worthwhile. We shouldn't just dismiss it. So I'm certainly supportive of the $5,000 grant. The other one, it's a bit rich, I agree, and I'm not convinced about that. And not to say that it's not great work, but the $5,000 will specifically benefit our community, no doubt about it. And this is a normal process that we've gone through in the last couple of years. So I won't be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter. Unmute, Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. I support everything Councillor Logan said, and I'm a little bit uncomfortable with when there's a need, putting, if you like, a bureaucratic rule in front of the need. I'd rather put the need first. So I'll be voting against this motion.
Okay, thank you. I will say where I sit with this. I agree that I think it's really important that we have money for the off cycle. I'm not saying that we should spend it, but I have seen in the past years where events or things happen that we wish we could support that, and it would be nice to have something in place so that we did have the ability to have some money to spend on it. So and I would hope that staff would continue to bring off cycle grant applications to us, because there are some exciting opportunities that may arise, and I would hate for us to limit that just because we don't have a line item. Saying that, though, I do appreciate where people are coming from, especially around the $12,000 event or a project, because I agree. I think it's a really good point that council has put out, that we did compare, and those comparison decisions were made based on that. But I also will support what Councillor Baxter and Councillor Logan, said about the $5,000. I think it's the Healthy Schools, Healthy People network is directly related to Colwood residents, and will support Colwood residents directly. Not that the other one doesn't as well, but I think it's an important aspect. So I won't be supporting the motion this evening because of that one. So I will look for any other discussion. Councillor Kobayashi, then Baxter.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. So here's my issue. Like, I will probably agree. I do like the $5,000 grant more than that $12,000 one, because there's just not enough background for that kind of money to be dispensed. So, but I guess this is where I'm still having problems. In principle, we're not following our own process. Should we not be doing the same process where we're evaluating this, and then we all hand in, what we think that dollar value should be? let's do an apples to apples, thing here. Like, even if we don't compare it with the other ones and we actually go through it and say, and each of us have an opportunity to say how much we should put towards these things. It's the fair way. Right now, we're just changing the way that we do business. And so, to the very things that everyone is saying right now, I'm just saying it's not the right way. So if we are going to do this off cycle, let's follow the same process. That's all I'm going to say about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter, then Parkinson.
Yeah, well, that's convenient. Councillor Parkinson, you said that one of these applications was actually for next year, if I'm correct in what I heard. So could you just tell us which one? Thank you.
I see Ms. Bovin hand up, so perhaps she could comment.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I did want to offer some clarification. I know that council has received information or requests aside from the formal off-cycle grant and aid applications that were received by myself. Speaking to the Healthy, sorry, and now I've got to get the name correct again. The Healthy Schools, Healthy People Regional Network. They did provide a letter to council back in September. That was not sent to me. I believe the intention was that would get brought forward similar to the fees for service with other organizations that are included in line items in our budget. That was missed. So we did reach out to Cindy and have her apply for an off-cycle grant and aid in order to bring it forward to council. So the letter that you have attached to the agenda tonight was the original letter sent to Mayor and Council. I did receive a full grant and aid application package from them, including all the required information, including that letter as well. The other application was received originally as an off-cycle grant and aid application, and then a few weeks later, they also sent separate information to you as a group for consideration. So that was also received a little bit earlier than you received it in February, I think it was. So just to provide that information, I also wanted to clarify that in the grant and aid policy, and we can certainly change this with council direction. There is number 7 has off-cycle applications, and it does note that staff will continue to bring forward applications through the year as long as there's budget available to do so. So staff is happy to bring forward a change to the policy if council directs us to do so, if you don't want us to bring forward applications, or if you'd like us to direct us to bring forward applications in a way that we do with the original batch so that they're grouped together. We're open to any direction council wants to give us.
Councillor Baxter?
I'd already asked my question of Councillor Parkinson. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just so actually, sorry, I had gone to Ms. Bovin. Could you comment on the question of which of these was supposed to land in 2023 and not 2022, as Councillor Parkinson outlined?
Yes. Sorry, my apologies. I don't even know if I can say that for sure without speaking to the organization, because we received a 2022, so staff received a 2022 off-cycle grant and aid application from the Fate Care Society. After that, they also sent Mayor and Council a request for funding for the next fiscal year. So I'm not sure if those requests are separate or if they are should be considered as the same request. What I do know is I received a 2022 grant in aid application after the deadline of November 15th last year.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Baxter?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Councillor Parkinson?
Yeah, just a few clarifications. I mean, if council wants to look at page 92 of our package, the February 7th letter from the Fata Care Society is where in the last line it says consideration for support next fiscal year as we expand our capacity. So that's what makes me think it may not even be for this year, and it may be. I'm not, it's not germane to my consideration whether it's a late one for this year or an early one for next year. The other one on the $5,000 one, I mean, that speaks just exactly to my point. I'm very, very concerned about youth mental health and suicide prevention. And when I went through the grants and aids, I skewed my numbers in that direction. And that was because, to me, that was absolutely vital for what our community and council should be doing. So now we're looking at something separate. And again, it gets back to my point is, okay, so here's another way to address suicide and mental health in kids. How does it stack up compared to the others? And maybe it's far superior and the others shouldn't be funded or should get less funding. It's just gets back to what is our process and how are we going to deal with it? So I know we have always decided to keep $2,500 aside for off-cycle grant applications. And I'm not trying to eat into that because there will be, some small minor things that tug at our heartstrings and we'll all want to support. So that's probably a smart thing to do. But as far as the rest of it, I stand by my earlier comments. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Yeah, and I guess my only comment to you, Councillor Parkinson, is in regard to the one. I think staff have kind of explained that it was just missed, and it didn't get actually put into the grants and aid. So, okay, I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'm going to call the question, and I will read the motion. The motion is to basically deny both applicants. Councillor, I need to lower Councillor Parkinson's hand. So those in opposition to the motion, please raise your hands. The motion fails. Mayor Martin, Councillor Jansen, Councillor Baxter, Councillor Logan opposed. Do I have a new motion? Councillor Jansen.
Thank you, Worship. Given the circumstances, I would like to support the Healthy Hands. What was it? Healthy Kids. The healthy one.
Healthy Schools, Healthy People Regional Network.
Thank you for the $5,000 because I do believe we own that to some degree, and that would be it. Thank you.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Logan. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you. And I believe that's all we need. Great. So let's move on to 7.6. This is Ian Borhill, our Director of Community Planning, regarding active transportation new plan project update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Once again, this item is to provide council with a mid-project update on the Active Transportation Network Plan project. This planning initiative started in November 2021, following the completion of the Active Transportation Network Foundations report, which outlined potential active transportation priorities after preliminary analysis of the city's transportation network. Based on this, council directed the initiation of 10 active transportation capital improvement projects spread over 2022 and 2023, the first phase of which are underway now. The upcoming draft Active Transportation Network Plan is intended to provide guidance on strategic policy, network planning, and future capital projects. It is also intended to feed into the updates to the Transportation Master Plan and the Development and Subdivision Servicing Bylaw later this year. A consulting team led by Dan Casey, a transportation planner with Urban Systems, has been hired to assist staff with this project, and Mr. Casey joins me this evening to present on an engagement summary and emerging directions for new and updated policies. With that, I'd like to ask that Mr. Casey be given the floor to provide his presentation on these two reports, which are also attached to tonight's agenda. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ian. And can we all hear me now? Excellent. Okay, I'm going to share my screen here and walk through 10 to 12 minutes overview of the work that we've been undertaking and to present some preliminary information for council's consideration. So do we see a title slide?
We do.
Excellent. Okay. So thank you, Mayor and Council. Appreciate the opportunity to be here in front of you once again tonight. Again, 10 to 12 minutes here, and we'll walk through some of the work we've completed to date and kind of open the floor for council input and direction on some of these items. So why the ATMP update? This work is being undertaken as an opportunity to engage with council and the community around active transportation, and very specifically your active transportation network. It's an opportunity to revisit previous network planning that was completed 2014-2015 as part of your transportation master plan and brought forward more recently as part of your official community plan. So it's important, and it's an opportunity to update facility design guidelines so that design guidance and expectations around active transportation facilities better align with more up-to-date best practices. Through this process, we want to identify priority projects that are to be the subject of shorter-term implementation. And then finally, this is meant to be pre-planning and a precursor for a more comprehensive transportation master plan update on the horizon that would include not only active transportation, but the city's road network and public transit as well. How did we get here? A bit of a history on what brought us to the point we're at today. Previous work back in about 2006 on a more operational level related to active transportation infrastructure. There was the 2015 Transportation Master Plan, and again, the 2018 Official Community Plan, both of which identified cycling and pedestrian networks, as well as supporting design guidelines. And then if you recall, about a year ago, I was fortunate enough to be here working with your group on an ATNP project foundations process, the goal of which was to identify active transportation infrastructure projects that would be the focus of 2022 and 2023 implementation. And so I understand design work is happening on those initially selected projects right now. I wanted to recap very quickly on some of the key directions from the official community plan. You have a great official community plan in terms of providing tangible direction on what we would like to see with our active transportation network. That's not always the case in many communities, so it's very nice to have that here. So some of the very key directions specific to sidewalks and the pedestrian network. The OCP talks about addressing sidewalk gaps and prioritizing addressing gaps in mixed-use centers, adjacent schools, and near public transit. It talks about expanding and enhancing multi-use trails, including along the waterfront. It talks about creating safe, accessible, and beautiful public realm without barriers. It talks about supporting safe routes to schools, including participation and support for the Capital Regional Districts program. And then very specifically, it actually touches on improvements in terms of sidewalk design. So it calls for a minimum sidewalk clear width of 2 meters, an additional width in high traffic, high pedestrian traffic areas, such as commercial areas and nearby schools. It also talks about creating separation by way of boulevard or parking between the sidewalk and the street. And so these criteria, the last two items in particular, give us great direction when we're focusing through this process very specifically on active transportation infrastructure. Similarly, but more specific to cycling, the OCP talks about expanding the network to link in with commercial areas, schools, parks, and community facilities. It talks about integrating our local city network with the regional network and adjacent municipalities, the Galloping Goose Regional Trail being a very key connecting point. The OCP talks about all ages and abilities infrastructure, so AAA cycling infrastructure. And it talks about 3 different facility types that are intended to be applied based on the context or the street where they're being applied. And so the 3 facility types are multi-use pathways, buffered bike lanes, and neighborhood bikeways. Neighborhood bikeways are intended as low traffic volume and low traffic speed streets where cyclists sharing the street with vehicles is comfortable and safe. And you'll note intentionally we have a few highlighted buffered bike lanes, and this is an item I want to circle back on in a few minutes. Just to kind of round out the planning context, we talked about the official community plan, we talked about the transportation master plan and how those really guide and create a foundation for the work we're doing here. Also wanted to highlight the importance that active transportation and the active transportation network is given through your strategic plan, as well as your relatively newly minted Parks and Recreation Master Plan, which identifies more specifically trails and connections to parks, and also provides some guidance around active transportation infrastructure, which we're able to pull forward and reflect specifically in this plan. So shifting gears a little bit, we have undertaken some early engagement activities. There was a web-based survey through the Let's Talk platform. There was a stakeholder workshop that was held that had participants from a number of directly impacted agencies or folks with real vested interest in active transportation in Colwood. And we've been maintaining a webpage and social media presence. Some participation levels, general levels in the activities that have been offered. We've had 370 people view the Let's Talk Colwood established webpage. 97 responses to our survey that was run generally through January. We had 99 unique locational comments provided to our online mapping survey. So this is a tool that allowed residents to drop pins on a map to indicate locations where gaps might be or safety concerns or whatnot. And we've had 12 different community and stakeholder organizations that engaged through this stakeholder workshop that we held, and then with follow-up conversations as well. Some of the key takeaways that we've identified through the conversations with the community, we've sort of isolated them here as pedestrian related and cycling related, but really there's a lot of overlap. Number one, far and away, is around the need to fill gaps in the network, that being both the sidewalk and pathway network as well as the on-road cycling network. We hear a desire for physical separation from traffic. Again, physical separation for people walking and rolling, as well as for people on bikes. And we heard a need for improved crossings, improved intersections, and improved lighting. A question was posed through the survey: what level of investment would you like the city to apply to walking and cycling improvement initiatives? We heard that 70% of respondents, keep in mind this represents 97 survey responses, so 70% of respondents indicated they would support more funding, 6% indicated less than current levels, and 24, approximately 1/4, indicated they'd prefer to maintain current levels. We're able to aggregate the feedback geographically from the map, the pin dropping map exercise. And so on the screen in front of us are areas where the highest level of input was received specific to pedestrian activity in the sidewalk network. So areas of blue represent where feedback has been provided, and you start to, and we've highlighted with dashed circles here, the areas where you start to see concentration of feedback, and therefore sort of a heightened concern and heightened interest in improvements in these locations. So working just generally from north to south, some of the key areas of concern include Island Highway near Whale Road and the Galloping Goose intersection. We see Souk Road at Mount View Avenue, and there's a pedestrian half signal in place there. We see the area around Kelly Road and Machosen Road, that intersection. Probably the greatest area of feedback was on Machosen Road, generally the section between Wishart Road and Lagoon Road. We'll see in a second similar feedback on the cycling side of things. The section of Lagoon Road to the east of Featherbell Road, heading toward the waterfront. And then we see concentrations in and around Carindale Road and the bottom side of Triangle Mountain, as well as in Royal Bay. I think moving over to the cycling side of things, what we take away from this is you do see some consistencies with the location of feedback we were receiving related to the sidewalk network. But a key takeaway here is a lot of this feedback seems to be concentrated on some of your more major roads. And so we see a lot of feedback on Island Highway and Souk Road. We see it up near the Whale Road intersection and the Galloping Goose intersection crossing. We see it a little further along Sooke Road, up closer toward Mount View Avenue and Kelly Road. We see concentrations again down Machosen Road, so the portion nearby Lagoon Road and Painter Road, and south towards Royal Bay. And then we see a concentration again where Lagoon Road meets the waterfront. So with some of this feedback in mind, we're at the point in the process where we've developed and started testing the framework for the plan. So this is sort of some of the high level directions that the more detailed network planning will fall out of. So we've had the chance to craft up a working, it's a vision statement, it's a working vision statement at this point, and had the opportunity to test it with stakeholders. So the vision statement reads as follows: Colwood is a community where people choose active travel on our safe, connected, and equitable network. Our complete network of sidewalks, trails, and cycling facilities connects destinations and provides welcoming places for all people walking and rolling. Schools, parks, and vibrant centers are connected to key neighborhood destinations by accessible sidewalks and comfortable cycling infrastructure. Here, parents enjoy walking or cycling their children to school, students have equitable and healthy travel options, and key destinations are conveniently accessible to all by active travel modes. The active transportation network contributes to Colwood's natural environment, community well-being, and social connectedness. So these statements, the statement is meant to describe what the active transportation network looks like and the experience traveling by active modes is like upon successful completion of the active transportation network plan. So really provides a vision and direction for what falls out through the rest of the plan. 7 key objectives have been identified, and these, as well as the vision statement, are contained in the emerging direction summary that's in the council agenda package. So there's a little more detail on these in there. 7 objectives are around creating connections within the community. Number 2 is around creating regional connections. 3 is around creating all ages and abilities facilities. 4 is considering multimodal transportation, so opportunities to enhance mobility beyond simply people walking and rolling or people cycling, so connections to public transit, enhancing mobility more broadly. Number 5 is around, again, broader community objectives. So looking at opportunities to invest in the active transportation network to achieve objectives beyond simply mobility, whether they be environmental sustainability, community health and well-being, economic prosperity, and so on. Number 6 is around sort of making the outcomes of this quite tangible in a way that we can get down to physically identifying priority investments and priority corridors, where to make those investments first. And then last, around a strategy of investments and how we work toward realizing this through implementation. And so again, some details around emerging directions contained in the council agenda package at a high level. Some of the key emerging directions are to create high quality active transportation facilities so that people feel safe and comfortable walking and cycling. To use active transportation infrastructure to help Colwood become more inclusive. To expand the sidewalk and trail network to encourage more walking trips. Number 4, we heard very clearly that Colwood residents want an extensive and safe network of cycling facilities. Number 5, supporting facilities that create an improved experience for people walking and cycling. And then lastly, to help maximize the positive impact of investments in active transportation by pursuing programs, maintenance, and supporting communications. So wanted to spend just the last couple of minutes focused in on maybe some more details related to the network itself and the infrastructure contained within it. So the map on the screen is showing the existing sidewalk network. It includes streets with sidewalks on 2 sides, shown in the solid black. Streets with sidewalk on 1 side, shown in the dashed black line, and then some walkways and trails shown for context. We've also cataloged all of the crosswalks that are currently in place, both pedestrian controlled with flashers and those that are without, just signs and pavement markings. And we're using this as the basis to then understand what the full build outs of the sidewalk network might look like, and then how we work backward from that full build out to identify those improvements and those gap filling opportunities that should be of highest priority. We've also used this opportunity to highlight some of the 2022 sidewalk improvements that were identified through the project foundations process. Those are highlighted on the map in blue. From north to south, A is Hegel Road, B is Kelly Road, the section between Sooke Road and Metchosin Road. C is Fulton Road, extending quickly up the hill from Sooke Road. D is Lagoon Road between Heatherbell and about halfway down to the waterfront. E is Owens Road, and F is Ben Homer Drive in the vicinity of the recent improvements on Painter Road. In terms of facility design, and this is maybe recap on a slide earlier, is basically we have quite good guidance contained already in your official community plan that meets best practice. 2 meters and 2 meters and beyond is a great width for a comfortable, safe sidewalk space. And the OCP already talks first about some of the supporting design parameters around minimizing interruptions with driveway crossings where possible, or introducing physical space, boulevard parking to separate the sidewalk from the street wherever possible. Moving over to the cycling network, similarly, the map on the screen is showing both existing facilities in solid colored lines and then proposed future facilities from the official community plan shown in the dash colored lines. It shows regional trails, the Galloping Goose. It shows multi-use pathway, bike lanes, and neighborhood bikeways. And so again, this is our starting point. The official community plan does include proposed cycling network. And so we're working through this process to sort of test that network, determine the community and council's support for what's in there or where changes might be necessary, and to work toward a refined version of this network plan through the ATMP. The layers included on here in the gray and the blue and the green also refer to more recent processes through the city. The project foundations process from this time last year identified the 80 road bikeway as a 2022 initiative, so kind of a first phase investment alongside the sidewalk links I talked to a minute ago. And it identified the portion of Metchosin Road between about Sooke Road and Lagoon Road as a more comprehensive complete street update that would include, both sidewalk and pedestrian facilities, as well as on-road cycling facilities. And then also wanted to highlight the Galloping Goose crossing component at Island Highway Sooke Road, and just bring that forward as part of this process as being something we are hearing from the community there's great support for, and understand that the city's in the process of trying to secure external funding to help make that improvement a reality. Now, just getting to the end here, and this one is important. So with respect to cycling facility design, so I did mention that the official community plan does a very nice job of identifying pedestrian design standards, expectations for how sidewalks are going to be designed, their width, their material, et cetera. On the cycling side of things, the OCP identifies neighborhood bikeways, shown in the bottom right. It identifies multi-use pathways, shown on the bottom left. And it identifies buffered bike lanes, shown on the top left. We want, through this process, to introduce and to test council's support for also including protected bike lanes as a facility type applicable on some of Colwood's most major and busiest roads. So the key difference between the buffered bike lane, shown top left, and the protected bike lane top right, is with the buffer bike lane, we do have dedicated cycling space, which is great. We have lateral clearance between the bike lane and where vehicles travel, but there's an absence of physical protection that could prevent a vehicle from entering the bike lane, and does not give the cyclist necessarily the sense of comfort and safety that they might be seeking. Versus the protected lane on the top right, you do see and this is just one of many possible protected bike lane configurations, but we see a cyclist elevated up alongside the sidewalk. We see a boulevard with street trees and up above a curb separated from where vehicles are traveling. So we do want to test with council, and I'm very curious the appetite and interest but really to working towards protected bike lanes as the default and the standard application for where cycling facilities are being considered along major roads. So lastly, timeline for the process, we initiated in late 2021. We're at about the midway point. We had the opportunity to engage with your community through January and into February. We have been working to start to pull together the draft plan itself. And we intend to work over the next few weeks and month to flesh out a full active transportation network plan and to come back to the community and council to gauge interest and level of support. So thank you for the opportunity to be here, and look forward to any questions.
Great, thank you. If you could drop your screen off because I can't see anybody. There you go.
Happy to. Yeah.
Councillor Jansen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just, I do have a concern. We know that there are some roadways that are going to be pressed as far as our road geometry goes to facilitate some separated bike lanes. I understand that that's the Cadillac version, but I'd hate to think that we slow down or inhibit some potential projects that would be to the net benefit of the entire community, including the cycling community, because we can't facilitate, or we just don't have a few more inches to facilitate the hard separated cycling lane. Can I get some comment on that, Ian and Dan?
I mean, happy to share my thoughts, and Ian, please add where you see fit. My feeling with what's being brought forward and proposed with respect to the protected bike lanes is that the way the Transportation Master Plan and the OCP read now, protected bike lanes are basically absent from the guidance that you have in place, where we want to bring that forward as we'll call it the default for the major roads. Now, not to say that in all, where there's constraints, where there's trade-offs that have to be made, you may end up with something a little more compromised from the protected bike lane, but in my view, at least, is in the absence of including it in the plans, you're not going to see it. I think the other piece I would add is that in many cases, and there's a lot of variability with this, but a protected bike lane, the physical width required for it can be quite similar to what the width requirements are for a buffered bike lane.
So I like that. Thank you. I just wonder if you're in conflict with that bicycle hanging over your shoulder there, Dan.
Guilty.
So thank you for that clarity. I appreciate that. And I'd love to see us include some language from my perspective that would facilitate that option wherever possible. I just hate to think that we hamstring ourselves in some upcoming projects where we are pressed for space, where we might have to consider other options. In other words, I love the Cadillac, but sometimes you're going to get stuck with the Pinto, 79 Pinto, like I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Logan, then Baxter, then Parkinson.
I'm just picturing Councillor Jansen and the 79 Pinto, but Dan, just for my 2 cents, I do agree that the protected bike lane should be included as a default. And I'm glad you mentioned about the width, the comparable to a buffered bike lane and the hash mark. And I was looking at actually the protected bike lanes that are just in front of Councillor Jansen's place of work that were just completed on, is it Blanchard, or is that the Patby Highway by Save On Foods and Sandwich there? And
that's Vernon Avenue at that portion, but yes.
Right. Very smart, and the curb, it's just separate by a curb, which is quite narrow. So yeah, so major roads, and I'd also, even if we can include routes to school as an example, as maybe a default kind of location for these things. But thanks, Dan. I do totally support that.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, I'd like to back up what has previously been said about supporting the protected bike lanes. My bike is my only transportation at least 98% of the time. So I do a lot of biking, and I'm comfortable in the buffered bike lane, but for the benefit of those not quite so happy biking, I would like to see protected bike lanes, but I would sound the same warning that Finn sounded, that we're going to struggle to achieve that in some of the right-of-ways. And I wouldn't want us to forget that we are going to need bus lanes in some of these right-of-ways as much as possible, even if it's only queue jumper lanes. Because much as I love biking, the buses are always going to carry more people than bikes, I think. But I did have a question on your map that showed where people had problems with pedestrian ways. And there was an odd grouping that was in Royal Bay, but it wasn't on Ryder Hesdall, and it wasn't in Latoria, on Latoria Road. It was kind of in the northeast quadrant of that neighborhood that's bounded by Latoria and Ryder Hesdall. And it is, I just find that strange that there would be pedestrian problems in that area. Have you managed to look at that in detail and figure out what that's about?
It's a great comment, and I was just looking at the supporting maps, which provide a little more detail as you were talking there. And I mean, the feedback we got related to lack of sidewalks and pathways primarily, which I find kind of interesting because a lot of those streets have been built recently with sidewalks on both sides. So it's something we probably want to investigate a little further, although we'll be limited by the format, the information, and the way it came in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parkinson.
Just to comment on Councillor Baxter's concern, most likely it was to do with construction traffic was blocking everything. That's an area of recent construction. Just a couple of thoughts here. Protected bike lanes, you sort of indicated were on high volume roads, but the protected bike lanes would be a good idea because of the volume of vehicle traffic or the volume of bike traffic?
So generally the justification comes from the characteristics of the street, the traffic. And so generally the busier the street and the faster the traffic is moving, the less comfortable a cyclist will feel beside that traffic, and therefore warranting a more significant bike lane treatment.
Okay, so then following up on some of the earlier comments about how we may be tight for space in a lot of these things, it really gets down to what the bike routes are, and then if we can find bike routes and pathways that don't coincide with major roads, that perhaps we can just tell bikes that not to ride on those major roads, or to be very careful. And that comes down to, I see in your report, you talk about preliminary identified priority corridors, but I don't think I saw a map of that yet. Did I? Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, we haven't really gone through that process yet. The map I showed pulled forward network planning from the OCP on the cycling side of things. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much. This question's for Dan. I was very surprised to see that for the pedestrians, an area of concern isn't the piece from Wishart Road up to Royal Bay, because it doesn't have a sidewalk right now, and lots of kids, high school kids there. I know see it in the mornings there, and I found it interesting that you show it higher, Wishart and Royal Bay, and there's sidewalks on both sides, but it's not down on Latoria, from Wishart up to Royal Bay, which there is no sidewalk because it ends right at Wishart. It goes right in front of my place and then down and it stops. So I just thought that was really unusual. And I guess it's not a concern. I would have thought it was, because it seemed to be a big issue 3 years ago anyway. So just a comment, and I don't know if you've, if you got something to counter that.
It's a good comment. Nothing to counter. I suppose the maps I showed reflect the feedback we received. Don't disagree with you at all. There's some pretty challenging locations through there for sure.
If I could just add that the survey responses were very much a snapshot of the people that decided to fill it out. It's not meant to represent, a representative sample of Colwoodians' opinion.
Yeah, that was my other question I had for you, Ian, is that these are Colwoodians that replied to this survey, or were there outsiders that replied?
Yes, there was an opportunity for respondents to identify where they live, and the vast majority were Colwood residents.
Okay, and the last part of it, is that a good sample size for us to use that data for whatever we're going to be doing in the future? I'm just wondering if it seems like a very small sample.
Yeah, we have to be careful not to look at this as a sampling of a representative population of Colwood. Really, it was a survey that members of the community could choose to fill out. We did not randomly select participants such that there would be a sample per se.
Thanks very much, Ian.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands. So staff, what kind of direction were you looking for? Just a conversation in regards to the protected bike lanes? Are you looking for an actual motion? What are you looking for?
Thank you, Worship. This, as was the case with the other project updates this evening, was really an opportunity for council to ask questions and make comments before the draft deliverables come your way. So that was accomplished very much today.
Excellent, thank you. All right then, council, I'm going to move forward. I'm not seeing any other hands. So that's going to take us to bylaws. And this is bylaw number 1913, Colwood Land Use Bylaw number 151, 1989, amendment number 188, CD 33 -2350 Souk Road. This is for third reading. Moved by Councillor Baxter, seconded by Councillor Logan. Thank you. I'm just going to lower your hands. Any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Looking for a motion to go in camera. I'm going to have to read this recommendation, council. I'll try and be as quick as possible. It is recommended that this council meeting be closed to the public in accordance with section 90.1 A, C, E, G, and I of the community charter. 90.1, a part of the council meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered relates to or is one of the following things. A, personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality or any other appointed position of the municipality. C, labor relations or other employee relations. E, the acquisition, disposition, or expiration of land or improvements if the council considers that disclosure could be reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality. G, litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality. And I, the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Moved by Councillor Kobayashi, seconded by Councillor Jansen. Discussion. I'm going to clear hands. Any in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you. Before anybody goes, Amanda, is the in-camera Zoom link in the calendar, or does council need to look to an email from you?
No, it's in the calendar.
Okay. So council, it is 8:48 right now. Let's, if everybody could be on at 8:55, you can run to the washroom, do whatever you need to, and if everybody could be back for the in-camera meeting at 8:55, that'd be great. Thank you.